How did we get here? We don't really know. Modern science allows us to travel to the edges of space and look into the deep, dazzling darkness of the universe, unlocking some mysteries while looking for signs of life like our own. Are we alone in this universe? And often this quest for self-understanding about who we are, we end up with more questions than answers. We may answer one question, but others complicate the simple answer I asked in the beginning of the sermon. How did we get here? We don't really know. Or we might even ask, why are we here? And we still don't really know. We have theories, we have ideas, we have beliefs that help us live with these questions. And most times we don't think about these questions. We try to make sense of more immediate questions like, what am I going to do with my life? How am I going to find a life partner? What am I going to do for my career? What am I going to wear to church? When I die, who's going to inherit my resources? Who will continue to support the causes and values that are important to me? How might I be remembered? And while we're not asking these questions, most likely we fill the void with a kind of endless chatter inside our heads and decisions and questions. And then if you're like me, you find yourself somewhere out there in the great ether space in the past or imagining the future. So for some of us, the focus of our imagination is simply about getting the right job or falling in love with the right partner, having enough to feed our families this week. It's all very relative. And for some, we get caught up in a kind of imagined disaster. We think about, well, what if? And so we live in this imagined, terrifying future. Will we get some horrible disease? Or if we get some horrible disease, how are we going to handle that? And what's interesting is, as human beings, we either live in a kind of scrubbed clean, fantasized past or a frightening, imagined future. And it's very difficult to be in the present, to be in the moment, even for a moment. It's almost as if there is this innate restlessness or anxiety that keeps us exiled from who we really are, the human condition. And Lent, I believe, helps us to slow down the movie of our lives and observe more closely the frame that we are in right now. And Lenten practices like prayer, reflection, and even fasting, and I don't mean dieting, I mean fasting, are tools to help us be more present and alive to the now. And it's kind of countercultural. You know, there's not a lot of Lenten sales going on right now. And things like prayer, even prayer, can be so difficult and such a challenge because we say, you know, what are we doing? Who are we talking to? Are we just talking to ourselves? What is prayer? And we find it, certainly I do, the monkey mind. It's like our thoughts swing like monkeys from one branch to another. And it's really difficult. And there are practices. There's a practice called centering prayer that kind of helps you to recognize the monkey when you are distracted, but then come back to the candle flame. Or practices like sometimes just the name Jesus and breathing in the name Jesus and breathing out the name Jesus. It's a kind of mantra. And we find a way in which we can get centered. It's interesting, I was talking to Marie just before the service about Lent and the idea of, and this is kind of taught in our schools. Our children are being taught mindfulness, and it's basically, she said it's the same process. They visualize activity, so the children imagine when they're being active, and then what is it like when they stop being active? And she said, that scientifically they have linked 3 breaths. There's a physical process. Some people, it's 3 breaths that bring us to a kind of center point. So centering prayer, the Jesus prayer, there are all sorts of tools out there that help to still the monkey mind, that both recognize the activity but also help us to kind of center. St. Augustine talks about the human condition, and he talks about our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. So this is not something that's new to us as human beings. And when we can do this, first for a few seconds, maybe for a few minutes, we experience this deep connection, but it energizes us for what is coming. It's not about just passivity, but it's energizing us and focusing us and clarifying for us what needs to happen next. And it's interesting, sometimes people say to me, I don't know how to pray. And I don't think there is one way to pray. Someone said to me, baking a loaf of bread is a prayer. And even, oh God, I can't pray, is a prayer. So, and as Episcopalians, it's interesting with our beautiful prayer book, sometimes our words get in the way of our prayer and our connection with God. We love words. We love telling God all the things that God already knows, right? We love giving our kind of shopping list of all the things and people, like a kind of Santa Claus list. We treat God. And sometimes the economy of words in prayer is actually the better way. Sometimes just lifting a person, Sarah, in light, in healing, that's all we need to do. Just lifting that person into a higher power, into a higher presence. And I think that this morning you think about the liturgy that we're celebrating. Is there a word or a phrase that jumped out for you this morning from the pages? O Lord, open. Lord, open. Open. That becomes a mantra that we could reflect on for a long time. And it's ways in which, again, the monkey mind, reconnecting the soul and focusing the mind and the will into something that's much larger than ourselves and our own agendas. And so we have this wonderful time, this wonderful gift in the church. The other thing about Lent is that culturally it's become very personalized. It's become very personalized in it's about me and my sin, or me and my disconnect, or it's me and my discipline. I'm giving up chocolate, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. When in fact the invitation is that the church, it's corporate. It's about a consciousness for the community to take a deep breath and to recenter. And it's as much about the community of St. Peter's as an institution thinking about who we are. Why are we here? What is our mission? What is it that God is growing and challenging us to become? We're not a club like the tennis and golf club or Mashomik. Some people think St. Peter's is just another club. They pay their dues and they can go and socialize. And I think we're more than that. But what is it that God is calling us to do and to be present in the world? And this is why Lent is so rich and so important to us. And we ask those existential questions not only of ourselves personally, but of our institutions and our world. There's some theories about midlife crisis. People in their 30s and 40s, again, our imaginary lives, that midpoint, we think we're midpoint in our lives, and there are some existential questions that are often asked in this period. I think I've had about 3 or 4 midlife crises in my life, and those of us who are on the other side of that may connect with these questions, but one of the questions is, have I met the love of my life, and am I happily partnered, or am I not? And what do I do with that? Am I in the career I've always wanted to be in? Am I on track with my professional life or am I not? What do I feel about that? What might I need to do to align my expectations and my reality for the next stage of my life? And I have children or I do not. And where am I with that? How do I deal with the fear of loneliness? Who's going to take care of me? These deep, existential, important questions that we're all kind of asking ourselves in the chatter. Have I met my financial goals or not? Have I faith in a higher power of God or do I not? Have I found a faith community that feeds me or not? Am I still searching for a spiritual home? What do I do about that? So these key indicators of a kind of midpoint in my imaginary lifespan are key questions that are very much a part of the Lenten experience. And we do it together. We're not alone in this. We're doing it together. And it's rather like these questions, I think for everyone, they seep up like the oil bubble that comes from the bottom of the ocean and has to get to consciousness, the top. And Lent gives us the discipline and the safety to look at it and to do it together. The story of Jesus' temptation in the wilderness is a kind of metaphor for what I'm describing. It's an alien and frightening place for most of us. In the Bible, it's seen as a desert, a wilderness, a place where life doesn't thrive, a place that Jesus has removed himself to kind of midlife. He's in his 30s, and he's reflecting on what God wants him to do. And he's tempted by Satan for 40 days. Other Gospels tell us the nature of the temptations. We didn't get that in today's Gospel of Mark. One of the temptations is about turning the desert stones to bread to satisfy his immediate hunger. It is a metaphor for turning to immediate band-aids and gratification like food, but Jesus looks for the way in which his relationship to God the Creator, the deeper ground of being, might be better for him as he prepares for the second half of his life. The second temptation is to throw himself off the top of the highest point of the temple. I always found this a kind of bizarre, what was that about? And I think, and the idea is the devil saying, throw yourself off this high place and God will save you. If you've got such great faith, God's going to save you. And that is about a circus. It's about creating drama. And it's not, and again, Jesus had to kind of recenter himself. Satan loves the circus, the show, something with drama and maybe a happy ending. But Jesus sees through that immediate thrill-seeking response to faith in God. And then the third temptation, Satan takes him to this high mountain and says, look all around you and everything you see if you bow down and worship me is yours. And it's that kind of egocentric, I am the center of the universe stuff, self-adulation and power, and how seductive that is. But Jesus sees through the illusion and turns to God, who is the center of the universe. And Jesus has his place within that universe. So this illusion of bread, immediate satisfaction, as the antidote to our human need for physical satisfaction, the way we seek thrills and the circus in our personal and our institutional lives, the drama, the seductive aphrodisiac of power and self-adulation, all of these illusory short-term fixes are part of the story in the gospel for this first Sunday of Lent. And it's interesting, this link between withdrawal in order to prepare for a challenge, because John the Baptist has just been arrested, he's going to be killed, and Jesus is reflecting, okay, if I step out and do this work, chances are I'm going to get done in. And am I ready for that? And in a way, there is a kind of a centering that you are part of something larger, and it may cost you everything, but you have to find your voice. And I was thinking about this in terms of the recent spate of sexual abuse that's in Hollywood and even in the Olympic Games. We just watched the play out of this abuse, not only from people who had the trust of the community and these young women, but the institutional silence that was allowed to go on, and to have the courage, these women to have the courage to name that, took enormous courage and enormous kind of inner strength that this kind of process I'm talking about, this is what Jesus was doing. Jesus was withdrawing for action to bring about the change of the world. And it's quite fascinating that, in Judaism, ancient wisdom, this story of creation, moving from creation to redemption, there is a story that we are part of. And it's not a straight line, it's a zigzag. And it's not easy. And it involves, often it involves, taking the wrong path. And then there are heroes and sheroes who God meets on the way, who makes the right decision, who does the right thing, who says the right thing. And the movement from creation to redemption, we move a little bit more forward. And we have that in today's story with Noah. It's a really important story of that things went so badly that the earth was destroyed. The flood, the image of the flood is all that was known, was destroyed. And in ancient Egypt, this is a very ancient kind of the wisdom of ancient community. In ancient Egypt, there was a belief that the creator god Ra would one day tire of humanity, return the earth to a watery abyss of none before beginning a new cycle of creation. And these stories of the overwhelming floods reflected the ambiguous nature of our relationship to water and its source, God. Both were vital to life and could drown and destroy, or bring about bounty and tranquility. And it's interesting, again, ancient wisdom, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the two rivers on which the first known and recorded human civilizations in Mesopotamia depended, flooded unpredictably, and their fearsome nature is expressed in many versions of this flood myth. And then it goes from that tradition into the Hebrew tradition and becomes the story of Noah. So this is a very, very old story. And I see the ark like a little seed. There's a little pod that floats on the water. And it's looking for earth to germinate in. And there's a wonderful part of the story where Noah, they're afloat for 150 days, and the myth says he sends this dove out, and the dove comes back with an olive branch. And it's interesting how that olive branch becomes a symbol for universal peace, right? And then a week later, the dove doesn't come back. So the dove has obviously found a place to nest, and the ark lands on Mount Ararat. And life begins. And the passage that we read today is the covenant, is the conversation between Noah and God, and it's a promise that he will never destroy the earth. It's a holy covenant between God and humanity and all living things. And what I love about this is two things. One is that our dependence on animal life as an indicator of our own well-being. The dove, the little bird, goes out, and that's the kind of the way in which we find out it's safe to move forward. And how that, this story for the 21st century has a whole new meaning today as we look at our planet, as we care for our planet, and we see animal life, the extinction going on, and the damage that unbridled consumerism is doing to our planet. And the Noah story speaks to us. The other part of the Noah story that speaks to me this year is the rainbow in the sky. You know, we think of the rainbow in our culture of kind of unicorns and happy clappy. In the Noah story, it's a bow. It's a symbol of war. It's a weapon. And God is basically saying to Noah, okay, here is this reminder that I'm not going to destroy the earth, but maybe you will. You know, so there's a kind of a spiritual development in the Noah story that we have to be stewards of the earth and to take care of it. So the journey in the Jewish tradition, there is some answers to those questions that I started with. Why am I here? What am I doing here? What's all this for? It is the story that we are created in the image of God. So there is goodness in us. There is the DNA. There is the creativity of God in us. And that we have to zigzag our road to redemption. And it's not an easy journey. But that we have these indicators of the covenant between God and humanity and these people like Noah and Abraham and Moses. And 2,000 years later, we look at Jesus. That Jesus is the person who combines the divine and the human, and the law is summed up in to love God, love neighbor as one loves oneself, and that no more do we have to shed blood to please this God, but instead this is my blood which is shed for you for the forgiveness of sins. And those who follow Jesus create that kingdom of heaven, that kingdom of God that is with us. So this is our framework as a people of faith as we begin this deliberate journey in Lent. We may find that we have some responses to those existential questions that I began the sermon with. So it is with these ancient myths and experiences we enter those deeper questions that we ask in Lent 2018. We move beyond the personal existential questions to the social and corporate. So I hope that these readings and these thoughts and these reflections may help you as you move in your own zigzag journey from creation to redemption as we move our way from Easter to spring this year. Amen.